not talking it up, but the west coast of Vancouver Island in the winter in a 15-foot welded aluminum with a 50 horse on is not really the place to be in 20-foot swell, but you just kind of do it. And then sometimes you get sort of pushed into it where you reach that point where you have the sea behind you and you're not turning around. You're just sort of committed and you're going until you can find a spot to pull out. And multiple times. But obviously always being safe and nothing really ever happened. But
relatively safe.
That was Jeremy Koreski, and you're listening to Sidechannels, presented by the Flyfish Journal. My name is Jason Rolfe, and I'm the editor of the Flyfish Journal, as well as the host of Sidechannels, along with our photo editor and my good friend, Kopi Voita. If you aren't already a subscriber to the journal, I hope you'll consider becoming one at theflyfishjournal.com. While you're there, you can sign up for our newsletter. We'll send the occasional announcement about product specials or reminders about our Smolt of the Month contest, which is currently underway, and I might be a bit biased, the real treat is the thoughtfully curated newsletter we put together each month in which we share things that we think are worth sharing. New films, playlist additions, online exclusives, books we think you'll dig. We look for the weird and the wonderful and deliver it to your inbox so you can focus on wading rivers rather than wading the World Wide Web. Sign up online. I think you'll dig it. Before we get into what was a really enjoyable conversation with photographer Jeremy Koreski, a quick word about the sponsors who make Sidechannels possible. Decked makes truck bed drawer systems that are top-notch, in addition to offering toolboxes, cargo gliders, and an array of accessories that just make life easier when you practice a gear-intensive pastime like fly fishing. These systems are tough as nails and weatherproof, and you'd be amazed at how it can improve a day on the water. I'll share a few more thoughts on my own experience at the break, but in the meantime, you can get decked and get after it at deck.com/flyfish. Sidechannels is also sponsored by Patagonia Flyfishing. Patagonia's commitment to making solid gear that stands up to all the abuse you can throw at it is matched by their dedication to seeking out, fostering, and telling great stories about fly fishing culture and conservation. It's a level of quality that isn't measured in weeks or months. Theirs is a long-term commitment. They utilize clever engineering and innovative materials to offer only essential gear built for a lifetime of hard use. It's gear that is built to connect with wild fish and wild places. Visit patagonia.com/fly-fishing for some great conservation stories and some of the most dependable fly fishing gear you can find, built to connect with wild fish and wild places. 10 years ago, in the introduction to our gallery of Jeremy Koreski's photography in issue 6.1, my colleague Colin Wiseman wrote, "Jeremy Koreski is a son of the ocean." At the time, Jeremy was 5 years into a fly fishing journey that had already taken him around British Columbia and beyond, probably spending more time with camera in hand than fly rod. Son of the ocean. It sounds hyperbolic until you start flipping through the images or scrolling through the work available on his website, or ideally viewing his work at one of his galleries. Water is a major player, almost always present in some form. Sometimes he's in it, sometimes he's far above it. Either way, this fisherman's son from the west coast of Vancouver Island has tapped into something fathoms deep, and it runs through a prodigious body of work where the line between commercial, editorial, and artistic is often blurred to show-stopping effect. On the commercial side, Jeremy's long client list, he's worked for Patagonia, YETI, Quicksilver, and Vans, among many others, means you've likely seen plenty of his images. You may not have realized they were made by Jeremy, but I'd be willing to bet good money you've lingered on his photos at some point, stopping to take a closer look. His list of editorial contributions is equally deep, including, in addition to the Flyfish Journal, work for the Surfer's Journal, Conde Nast, Outside Magazine, National Geographic Adventure, ESPN, and plenty of others. In 2015, he published This Is Nowhere, a coffee table tome organized around elemental subjects: water, wind, earth, fire, and the unknown. He's had a gallery in Tofino, BC for years now, and recently opened a new one in Vancouver, BC, called the Wild Space Gallery. Well worth a visit if you find yourself in the area. Kopi and I met up with Jeremy in Vancouver on a bright, late spring day and talked in his room in a historic hotel overlooking English Bay. A quick note for some context, diving into the episode, we were chatting about some of Jeremy's recent trips with guide and outfitter Hillary Hutchison, who we'll actually be chatting with later this season, and her husband Eben, a couple of the plethora of fishy folk Jeremy often finds himself traveling and shooting with. It was a great conversation. I have been wanting to talk with Jeremy and learn more about him for a long time, and I was really happy to have the opportunity to sit down with him. We had a great time, and I hope you enjoy it as much as Kopi and I did. Let's do the show.
Yeah, I think I first met Hillary on a trip for, I don't even know what you call it. Have you guys heard of Fishing BC?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So
it's like a kind of tourist, bureau or travel,
a branch of... Yeah, so I think I first met Hillary on a trip for Fishing BC. It's a branch of BC Tourism here in Canada. And it was in Fernie, and we hit it off. It was a great time. We had a really fun time. And then because she works with Patagonia and I've been working with Patagonia, we started talking about doing trips, and she kind of just laid out a bunch of trips that she had coming up, and we started working together.
Come on. Yeah. Did you fish with Paul?
Yes.
Okay.
I love Paul. I want to go back to Fernie to fish with Paul again. He's great.
Outside of short interactions at IFTDs and whatnot, that's kind of where I first hung out with Hillary the most as well, in Fernie with Paul. Yep. And I forget the name of the shop, Elk River Fly Shop, River.
Yeah,
something.
He has. Anyway. Paul has it pretty dialed.
Yeah, no, he was freaking salt of the earth.
Did he? How many keychains did he have?
Oh man,
did that happen when you were there?
I don't know if I got the keychain experience.
Oh man, we rolled up to this gate and he kind of just pulled out of his pockets. He's like, he probably had 100 keys, and he just started trying the keys for these gates to get through. And I don't know what was happening there, but yeah, we got through the gates. It was good.
That's all. Like he just has access to private land or timberland or something like that.
I don't actually know what's kosher or not.
We were like,
I have a photo of all these keys on this stump. He just kind of dropped these keys down. There's 100 keys.
That's amazing. What's Paul's last name?
Samisha, or I'm probably botching it.
I'd have to look it up.
I think it's Samisha.
It is Elk River though.
Yep.
River Fly Shop.
Yeah.
Cool operation, and he and Hillary are close too.
Yeah.
They have a good relationship. So.
Is that BC or Alberta?
It's BC. It's kind of on the border.
Right, close, right?
Yeah. Close to the Alberta border.
Cool.
Yeah. But that was the first time fishing with Hillary, and she doesn't take fishing too seriously. It's about having a good time.
Yeah.
And she's still passionate about the experience and making sure everyone has a good time. But yeah, she likes catching big fish, but it's still just about that fun experience.
Yeah, when we went out with her, or when we went and saw her, we did the interview with her in the morning, and then we went fishing in the afternoon. So we didn't. It's kind of a bummer because it would have been fun to talk with her a little bit more about the river, because she's somebody that is so connected to that river and that valley and the forks of the river and everything, and it was just. I feel like I learned a lot about trout fishing generally, just with how deep her knowledge is of that specific river.
Yeah, I've only done one overnight with Hillary and Eben in Montana, and it was a lot of fun.
On the Flathead, or was it somewhere else?
I honestly don't know, because there's so many little rivers there. I assume it was a Flathead.
There's multiple. What is there?
There's the Flathead, and then there's all the forks.
North Fork.
Yeah. We drove in a bus from her company up a ways, and then we put in, and we did an overnight. And
Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was 2 Julys ago.
Did you grow up fly fishing?
No.
When did fly fishing come into the picture for you?
Fly fishing didn't come in until I was in my late teens. Yeah. And I was into photography, and photography introduced me to fly fishing, really. There was a fly shop in Tofino. It was called, I think it was called Clyquet Fly Shop at the time. It was Jay Mole, and he knew that I was into photography and knew that I was into fishing and asked me to come out. And then through Jay, I started hanging out with some of his guides, Blake and Connor, and those guys really pushed me to pick up a fly rod. But my background, my dad was a commercial salmon fisherman in Tofino, and that was kind of my introduction to fishing. And my earliest memories would be on the salmon fishing trawler with my dad when I was probably 5 or even younger. Wow. And walking down to the dock in the dark, and I wouldn't be able to go on longer trips in a day. So he'd take me out on the boat by himself, just do day trips.
Yeah.
And I've said this in the past, but my earliest memories are waking up on the boat and smelling bacon and eggs, and just kind of, we'd already be offshore and we'd be fishing. He'd have all the lines out and he'd have the pigs out and everything would be going. And he tells this story where every time we'd hit a swell or something, the cowbell would make a noise, and that generally is the noise when a big Chinook salmon bites a line. It's pulling hard enough that the bells start ringing. And every time we'd hit a swell, I'd say, Dad, there's a big fish. There's a big fish. You got to pull the line. So you'd have to pull all the lines in to check the lines for sure. Of course, there would be nothing there.
Yeah.
But those are some of the earliest memories of fishing. And then as I grew up, I was always around the water. My parents were always taking us camping. And Tofino is a very different place. There was not really much tourism. And so we go camping. I remember camping on places that now you'd see a lot of people. If you went camping there for a few days, you'd see planes, you'd see boats, you'd see whale watching tours, you'd see all kinds of activity. Back then, you didn't see anything. You'd see maybe a plane fly over every few days. You might see other boat go by, but other than that, it was just nobody around.
Sleepy.
Was it just kind of, I would like you to maybe just kind of describe Tofino and kind of that region of Vancouver Island a little bit, just from your perspective. But I mean, back then when you were a kid, was it just kind of this little kind of rural backwater town? Was it like a place where hippies were going out there and kind of living, with nature, or what was it like back then? Artist community?
I guess being a kid, I didn't really know any different, but it was very small compared to what it is now. And there are always the surrounding indigenous communities. And I went to school with a lot of First Nations kids. That was just growing up. It was sort of a mix of different kids, and you'd see kids coming across from Opitsit, the local village across the bay from Tofino. And so that was just kind of the norm. And I didn't know what tourism was, but I just remember it being, you'd be at the beach and there wouldn't be a lot of people around. And there were a few places in town that were resorts on the beach, but not like it is today. It was a pretty sleepy town, and you knew everybody. And I think this is the same anywhere, but back then your mom would just be like, oh yeah, come back at dinner time. See you later. And that's what it felt like. And it felt like a very safe place to grow up, and you kind of knew everyone in town.
In spite of all the bears and wolves.
Yeah.
Mountain lions.
It's kind of, did I tell you guys we had a cougar kill 4 of our sheep yesterday?
Oh no.
So now I'm living in the Cowichan Valley, a little bit of a sidebar, but we had we think it's a mom and 2 cubs came in and killed some of our sheep yesterday in the Cowichan Valley, which is a bummer.
Yeah.
But yeah, back then you didn't think about it. You just sort of grew up with bears and mountain lions, and on Vancouver Island we don't have any, or we haven't had any grizzly bears for a long time. So we never grew up with sort of that fear of being attacked by a bear. You just see a black bear, and it was just a part of being out in the bush, and as long as you didn't harass the bear, they would go on their way. And I mean, personally, I'm more scared of spiders and snakes. If I go to Australia or I go anywhere tropical, I'm always asking, is there any spiders or any snakes I need to worry about? Because no way. But now, even grizzly bears, you get to, you learn and have experience being around them, and you know what to look out for. And most of the time, if they're well fed, you don't have to worry about them. They don't want anything to do with you, and you don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah. I mean, that was a little bit tongue in cheek about the bears, only because every time In Washington State, I've seen a bear once in my whole life. And I know there's plenty of black bears around Washington. I've seen one sitting along the side of Interstate 90 just eating grass.
Yeah.
But anytime I've ever been up to Vancouver Island, it's like every day, bear.
Yeah,
bear.
I saw a bear the other day on the way to Tofino. I was just eating grass on the side of the road.
Yeah. So it's never something to be scared of necessarily, but they're there. Like if you're living in a sort of slightly more wild area on the island, like you're in the thick of it.
Yeah. Right? And it's just something you grow up knowing that those animals are there and to be aware of them, but generally they're not a problem. I think it's when we start encroaching on their territories and their routes. Totally. I remember multiple times setting up camp where we probably shouldn't have, where we could very much see it was a game trail. And then sure enough, a bear would come into camp and be like, well, this is their trail, not our trail,
Yeah.
But yeah, a friend just had a wolf come into his yard the other day for an hour and a half, and he's trying to get his dog and this is also in Tofino. And so the wolves and the bears and the mountain lions are moving through that space. Yeah. And as there are more and more humans around, it's harder for them to move through and get through without seeing a cat or a dog they want to eat.
Yeah. That's the one thing I haven't seen is any wolves up there. I've been up to the island a bunch of times, but I've never seen a wolf.
They're harder to see.
Yeah.
For sure.
Little sneakier.
And mountain lions.
Yeah. So did that, back to Tofino a little bit, only because from my perspective, it seems like Tofino and Vancouver Island and growing up in that area has a lot to do with who you are and what you do nowadays. Anybody who looks at your photography is going to instantly see that connection. But I mean, how would you describe Tofino and that side of Vancouver Island to people who aren't familiar with it?
Well, this is cliche, but it's the end of the road. I mean, it's the end of the road on the middle of Vancouver Island on the west coast. It's where the Trans-Canada Highway ends. Mm-hmm. And it's very remote and it's very rugged. And it's interesting to think about people have been living there before white settlers show up for 10,000 years, plus 10,000 years. And I always think about we're out there and we have Gore-Tex jackets and we have fire starter and we have all these things, but people have been doing this for thousands of years. And so you kind of just step back and appreciate everything that has come before you, and it's just so wild. And quite a few years back, I did this book called This Is Nowhere. And for me, I love the idea of nowhere being somewhere special, somewhere you find on your own and somewhere that it's not easy to get to and you have to put the work in to find this spot. And I asked my friend Giselle, who I grew up with, she's First Nations, if she'd write a story about the area, and she did. It's in the book. And she was a little concerned with the title, This Is Nowhere, because she thought it didn't show respect to the area. It's not... she took it the wrong way, or she didn't see it as being special. She thought it was a white person's way of saying there was nothing special there. It's nowhere. But in my mind, those are the places where everything's happening. Those are the places where I want to be. Those are the places where I want to go. And that's really, I think, growing up in Tofino is what really, once I picked up a camera and I found that could be my vehicle, those are the places I was driven to go, the places that were unknown. And I guess as a white settler, it's a little bit different because those places had already been traveled upon for thousands of years. So that's maybe where she thought it was a little strange. But I did the book. She wrote in the book. It turned out great.
Did she kind of come around a little bit to your conception of
she
that?
Did.
Or at least
she did enough to be okay
it?
With being in the book.
Yeah. That's cool. I mean, that's, I think that's, there's something special about being able to have that kind of dialogue with somebody, and somebody who's not afraid to tell you, like, hey, I think your vision is a little off, and then you can come back and say, well, what if you think of it this way? And that ability to, especially with a creative project like that, that's really valuable.
I think those conversations should always there should always be a space for those conversations to have, even if they're tough. Or I always that really made me think, oh my gosh, people have been here for thousands and thousands of years. It's been a very special place to a lot of people.
I think the next part of that is just, how did that, create the Jeremy Koreski who runs around the world with a camera now, and gets these amazing shots of the wildlife that you grew up with. And I think that really distinct sense of place, like you were showing us the aerial shot of that little island in the gallery earlier, and just there's something about I think photographers are incredibly fascinating for a lot of different reasons. I spend a lot of time with Kopi, and we've talked about this a little bit. Partly because I'm not a photographer at all, but I kind of have this little trick, this game that I'll play where I try to see things as Kopi sees them. Okay. I try to if I'm trying to snap a picture, I'll try to, do it in a way that Kopi would do it, in a sense. And so, I think part of that is just, you photographers, you guys see things differently. You guys are framing things up. This is what I imagine anyway. You guys are always framing things out in your mind. And so you're, seeing that island, getting that shot, recognizing how special it is. I think it's, probably partly just that's the skill of a photographer, but it's also partly your connection to that place and the deep ties that you have to
the
that
experiences.
That whole region, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think just thinking about it now, a lot of the way that I see the world comes from my experience as a kid in Tofino and on Vancouver Island, and all those little experiences, camping or fishing or out in the boat. But I don't think I really appreciated it until I left. I wanted to be in the big city. I wanted to be skateboarding. I wanted to be in the city. I wanted to be where things were happening. And then when I graduated, Tofino was too small. So I did a year-long trip to Australia. And
you were already shooting photography by this point?
Yeah. I was taking photos, and I traveled around Australia. And after a while, I was like, oh man, I need to go home. I really like taking photos, and this is a lot of fun, but there needs to be more than just traveling around and shooting photos. So I enrolled in a school in Vancouver, and came back for a couple of years, and I did a part-time college program, a continuing studies program, which is great. I was actually talking to a friend today about it, where my professors were working professionals, and it was only in the evenings and on weekends because they're actually working.
Yeah.
In photography.
In photography.
The program was a photography school.
Yeah, it was photography. And I actually didn't finish my final project or graduate. I sort of learned what I wanted to learn, and I was like, okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
Nice. It was interesting at the time. We were still shooting film. So it was very different. I remember there was a course in Photoshop, and I was like, what's Photoshop? I'm not going to do that. But I remember two of the business courses. I mentioned this today to a friend too. Those two business courses were the most important courses that I took in photography to, as of value as to where I am today. Yeah. And so for me, the camera has been this vehicle that takes me all around the world, and I get to meet interesting people, and I get to build relationships with folks, and it's been a lot of fun, but I also need to make a living at it. So it's been this balance. Yeah. And I needed to leave Tofino before I could really appreciate Tofino. And once I graduated school, then I was like, I think I'm going to go back there and base myself there. Yeah.
And you live there now, or kind of split your time? Split
my time somewhat? Now. Yeah. My wife grew up on the east side of the island, and her folks have a great property in the Cowichan Valley, and she doesn't want to give up where she grew up, and I don't want to give up where I grew up. So we split our time, and we have a 12-year-old daughter, so we're moving a lot. And then also our daughter Bella's schedule is crazy too. So
yeah,
it's a busy time of life, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. As far as the balance goes, you're talking about kind of, there's the commercial side of it, and then I don't know if you would call it the creative side or editorial side, or how you would word it. But how do you find that balance when you're out on projects? Is every project a little bit of both? Do you try to mix them as much as you can? Because I mean,
always mixing.
There's plenty of what I think could be dubbed commercial work that you've done that would also belong, in an art gallery or on somebody's wall in their living room, or whatever.
That's where I feel like I've found the balance that works for me, and this has all happened very organically. Sort of, I think the main reason I'm still in the photography world is because I love taking pictures. That's the bottom line, is I like having a camera and capturing what I see. And I've realized that what I see is a little bit different than what other people see. It's different than what you see. It's different what Kopi sees. And I like that challenge. I like seeing what other people might not see in a scene, or actually being able to visualize it before it happens, where it doesn't happen very often, but I will have, especially with nature, you can't ask the bear to move over there into the light. But when it happens and you can see it happening, and there's an image that I shot a couple of years ago where we're in a tree and we're watching these grizzly bears feeding on salmon. Yeah. I'm like, oh man, if this bear comes into the light, this is going to be incredible. And it came into the light and I exposed for the bear, and the whole background is just black, and it just looks totally out of this world. And people kind of question it, hey, what kind of Photoshop? And it's like, no, that's straight out of camera. That's what I saw happening, and I was able to will it to happen somehow. Yeah. But back to your question, I think I'm still into photography because I love taking photos. And so I've created this world where I balance the commercial and the personal. And now I have a little gallery in Tofino, so I can actually create those personal images that really fulfill me while I'm on a commercial shoot. And then also growing relationships with lodges and with people. And I've been going to a particular lodge called Nemo Bay for the last 13 years now. And
where's that at? Is that on the island?
That's on the mainland. It's the southern Great Bear Rainforest.
Okay.
And I was asked to go there 13 years ago to photograph the lodge owner. And at the time it was Craig, the father of Fraser, who owns it now. But I met Fraser on that trip, and he didn't have any budget, but he had some helicopters, and he's like, hey, I'll trade you time in the helicopter to shoot some aerial photos. And then that grew and as he grew, and as the resort grew, I also grew. And then now it's 13 years later, and we're best friends, and we have a lot of fun shooting photos. He's the crazy creative, dreaming up all these scenarios, and then I just show up and try to capture them the way he sees them in his head. And
that's cool.
Yeah. And so, it's just, but it's taken a lot of work to find that balance and find the sort of, the work that pays, but then also find the fulfilling side that I want to shoot, the personal work.
Yeah.
Was that some of your first exposure to shooting out of helicopters or airplanes?
That was my very first exposure at Nemo, was a heli in Heli. They actually, Fraser's dad, Craig, picked me up in a helicopter, and I was just like totally blown away. Like, I get to go in a helicopter. This is crazy. Sign me up. I want to come back. But no, I was exposed to shooting from the plane when I was growing up in Tofino. There was a local guy named Doug Banks, and he owned, a long time ago, he owned Tofino Air. And so he was the first one to take me up in the plane and let me shoot out of the plane. And then I would always be asking questions like, hey, what can we do? Can we pull the doors off? Can we do this? Can we do that? And
to basically kind of like help your view,
my vision,
and
everything. The vision that I had. I mean, and so obviously you don't just meet a pilot and ask them to take all the doors off. But that's something that now I've sort of had enough experience in the sky that I'm very used to, flying around in an airplane or helicopter with no doors on, and you just tape your seatbelt in and you're good.
Yeah.
And maybe one of the reasons I don't really like drones.
I was gonna counter or follow up with something of that nature, because earlier you had kind of mentioned how you were scared of them or whatnot. And I haven't spent a lot of time with you, but in my mind, I guess I've known that you have done a lot of aerial photography, but in my head, I kind of have, it's always been like, oh, Jeremy he's not a drone guy. Like it just,
I mean, I love the drone look,
like
and I mean, there's a time and a place, and I'll probably end up buying a drone eventually.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, I think just
you heard it here first.
My previous experience being in a helicopter or plane, and that sounds really sort of ridiculous that I get to go around in helicopters and planes, but a lot of those trips I'm putting on my credit card. And people ask me, "Oh, you're so lucky you get to go in a helicopter." I'm like, "Yeah, I just threw my credit card down and we went."
You can do it too.
Yeah,
so you're kind of looking at it as an investment almost, in the sense of you go up in that helicopter. Those are images that you're going to be able to sell. You're going to be able to pay for that trip.
Hopefully. Yeah,
right?
that's the idea.
Yeah.
And I always try and include friends or family or staff at the gallery. We'll go up and shoot photos. We had a staff trip last fall, and I knew the images that I wanted, and it was a cold morning, pulled the doors off the helicopter, threw all the staff in the helicopter and flew around and shot photos. And almost as much as taking the photos, it was worthwhile just seeing their enjoyment on this flight.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to the drones. I love that drone look, but the quality of the cameras just isn't there yet. And I also love the idea of being up in the air and looking down and having that experience and having my hand on a camera and looking through the viewfinder and actually seeing something and then capturing it. But I've just seen too many people get cut by drones, and just too many stories. And and they don't like me. They fly away from me. I just don't like it.
That's so funny.
I don't have a drone, and I don't have a really big desire to own one. I'm in the same boat. Like it's pretty amazing perspective that they can provide, as is airplanes and helicopters as well. But I agree with you in that it never made sense having like my view be remote in that sense, how you would look through a screen and you can see what that drone is seeing. It's like I totally agree with you.
I tried the other day to fly this thing. My friend who's filming on the shoot, he's like, "Oh, you gotta take it." And so I took the remote and trying to fly it, and it just doesn't feel. For me, I'm actually, I think I'm getting over it. My wife's calling bullshit on me, but she's like, "You're over your scared of height. You're over your fear of heights." Forever, I was really afraid of heights.
Really?
But I could fly around with no doors hanging out of a helicopter.
And that was fine.
It was fine, but I think it was because I had that disconnect where I put all my faith in the pilot, and I don't have to think I don't want to fly in the helicopter. I just want to take pictures out of it. And that's the same with the drone. I don't want to fly the drone.
I just want to take pictures.
Do you think that with the fear of heights thing, do you think it helps having the camera in your hand? Like
100%.
There's a little bit of like that sort of takes you out of the flying moment and puts you into
multiple different situations whether it's in the air, not so much in the air because it's all been fairly knock on wood, safe experiences. But I've noticed when I have my camera, I've noticed it in the ocean before. When I'm surrounded, I remember being surrounded by this big group of sea lions, and I had my camera up and we're shooting photos. And I remember for whatever reason, I dropped my camera down and I was kind of looking around. I'm like, holy shit, I'm like in it right now. I'm in the mix. Like these are massive mammals with huge teeth.
Bad thoughts started creeping in or something.
I lifted my camera back up like I was going back into the TV, and I'm like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
No problem. So it's like probably the same with the heights. I just
little shield.
It's a shield. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
And I obviously don't go out thinking that, especially with a lot of wildlife, but just sort of being put in that situation and realizing it, whoa, this really is kind of a disconnect of where I am right now, and maybe I'm pushing a little too far.
Yeah. Yeah. When did what was the sort of first trip or the first assignment that kind of gave you the feeling of like, oh, I'm getting to where I want to be, or I'm getting to a place that is going to be, potentially really rewarding both monetarily and artistically? When did that shift kind of happen for you? Because you're basically these days, and I think for quite a while, you're a full-time photographer. This is what you do. It's not a side gig or anything like that. When did that when and how did that sort of come together for you?
I remember being in Tofino, and this is I've said this before. This has been in bios, but my dad gave me a Canon AE1 when I was 13, and so when that happened, instead of being in the water,
did he give you that because like just out of the blue?
I think maybe he got it from my grandfather who passed away. I can't actually remember that part. I just remember he's like, hey, check this camera out. This is here's some lenses, here's some film.
Go play around.
Yeah. And so I did that. And of course it was shooting film. You had to wait a long time to get your film back. But I remember getting some of those first rolls of film. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm going to go shoot flowers in my mom's garden. I'm going to shoot this. I'm going to shoot snakes and whatever. But then when I started photographing a lot of the things that I was doing at the time, surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding, I started finding more enjoyment actually being behind the camera than actually participating in sports. Doing that thing. And so I had to do a lot of those things. But I was at the skate park a lot with my camera. I was taking my camera on snowboard trips, and instead of doing the big hit, I would be the guy farther down, getting the angle, taking the photo, and then surfing too. But with surfing, I found a way that I could still be really close to the action and almost a part of it by swimming around with my camera. And that was an amazing connection with the ocean, with my camera, but also with the people I'm working with, close friends. And so that kind of grew into, this is amazing. This is a lot of fun. I get to be in not always the most comfortable positions in the ocean where you're getting blasted by waves and there's sea lions and whatever. But just having that connection with my friends. And then when I actually started making money at it, I got to travel places with my friends and actually make money doing something I really loved. That's where it started clicking.
How old were you? Was that pretty early?
No, that wasn't that early, but I'm trying to think back to your question. There were a couple kind of key things. I remember a guy named Chris Morrow was the editor of Surfer magazine, and he came with a group of guys to Tofino. And I remember showing him some sheets of slides, and he's like, oh my gosh, you got to submit these to the magazine. We'd love to run some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And one of my first features ever was in the Surfers Journal, and the byline was Jason Koreski. They got my name completely wrong. And
was that the issue that they ran like a portfolio of your stuff, or was it more of a?
I think it was before that. There was I can't remember the year, but it was, and I can't remember the name, but it was more about the area than about just me. So that was one of those things, meeting the editor of Surfer magazine and him liking some of the photos. And then the other one was Keith Malloy from Ventura, California, came up, and I remember shooting with him, and he was working with Patagonia, and he's like, hey, I can take these photos down. I can show the photo editor there, Jane Sievert. So he took some of the sheets of slides, and making the connection with Jane Sievert, I think, was really kind of what solidified it. She wanted to buy a few of the photos, and I was like, wow, I can actually make some money and pay some bills doing this.
Yeah.
And go on cool trips. And so that's when I sort of realized what I could do with my camera. And that's where I really started kind of hustling and pushing and creating ideas. And
yeah. All right, we'll get back to Jeremy after the break, but in the meantime, let's talk about Decked. I mentioned previously that for me, a guy who's rarely as organized as I'd like to be, the Decked truck bed system is a game changer. I think one thing I've noticed is that because of how thoughtfully it's been built out, with dividers and deco boxes and bins that can be arranged in a multitude of ways within the drawers, the arrangement of your gear almost becomes self-evident, as if all along there was really no other way to do it, even if everyone ends up using the space in their own unique way. Fly boxes and reels go here, cargo straps go there, rods go on this side, waders go on that one. The thing about it is this isn't really how my brain works, but it's obviously how the brains of the designers and engineers over at Decked work, and for that I am very thankful. Decked has taken the guesswork out of it and made a product that, like other top-level products out in the world, makes life easier in an efficient and, I'd argue, even a pleasing way. As always, this stuff is made in the US and shipping is always free. Visit decked.com/flyfish to figure out which system best fits your rig, and then get out there, get decked, and get after it.
Were you a photo editor for a surfing magazine at one time?
Yeah.
In the past?
And again, I can't remember the years, but there was a Canadian surf magazine that was started by a company called SBC Media in Canada. And they did, I think they started out with sailboarding. I can't remember the name, but then they did kiteboarding Canada, they did skateboard Canada, snowboard Canada, and
Surfing Canada.
SBC Surf. It wasn't Surf Canada, it was SBC Surf. And I did that for a few years when my friend Malcolm was the editor. And yeah, that was fun to work with a lot of different people. And that may be one of the reasons that I like producing shoots now. I kind of leaning towards the production side, because I like working with a crew of people to create something cool. Yeah. I don't need to be the content creator.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun doing that.
Did you, I guess I wanted to ask you kind of if you ever had like an internal, struggle at times, like from your time as a photo editor, seeing the amount of other people's work that you may or may haven't of, and, wondering if that would kind of influence your own work in any way.
Like looking at the work? I
guess just seeing...
And being worried that I would
maybe not. Yeah. Like in a way, or just, because I feel like I've come across this, maybe theory or whatever in, multiple disciplines of arts and perhaps some other things
creep
too,
in a little bit,
where, some folks might kind of want to cover their ears and cover their eyes, like when they're doing their thing, and it being incredibly creative, to kind of not have other things influence themselves. And I guess I wonder about that sometimes, doing what I do as a photo editor, and then versus my own kind of photography. And I don't think, I'm not saying that, all my, photos are heavily influenced by everything everyone else's or this or that. But it's just kind of, I don't know, it's something that goes through my head at times. And maybe it's just like one of those, like,
when
artists.
You take a certain photo, or you're, or is it more style?
I think I don't know. I can't say. I just wonder, if because I'm not, but like I feel like being exposed to the amount of, perhaps photographs that not just everyone is seeing. I mean, these days we're also so bombarded by them with, the internet and whatnot. But
no, I would say I love that shit. Bring it on. Bring on as many photos as you can throw at me.
Like, I want to see them all.
Because, and I don't know where this came from, but I know that I never want to try and copy somebody else.
Totally.
And I might take a part of their vision and turn it into mine.
Yeah.
But I like the biggest diss for me would be to have somebody say, "Hey, you took my idea and replicated it." Like that's not what I do. For me, the whole reason is to create something as original as possible, and it doesn't happen that often, and that's why we're talking about it today in the Wild Space Gallery. Like I less is more for me. Right from the very, very beginning, I'd rather show people less and have them be interested to see more rather than just bombard them with stuff all the time. And even my social media, I'm kind of like, I'll post 10 times and then I won't post for 6 months. And it's not good for business.
Yeah.
But I don't really care, I guess. I've been really fortunate that a lot of the clients that I work with don't really care about me being an influencer. They just care about the work that I do for them. I don't have to show it on my social media.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a love-hate thing with me. There's a lot of reasons not to like it, and there's a lot of reasons to like it. The connections you make with people, and just the fact that a lot of these platforms are free, and you can show a heck of a lot of people out there what you do. So, yeah. But I think, I love the more I'm bombarded with different people's vision of what they see, the better in my eyes.
Yeah.
But I think it comes back to, I would never want to take something and then try to do the same thing.
Sure.
I want to take that, but then do something completely different.
Well, it's almost there. It's almost, there's a level of confidence you might need to have that attitude or have that outlook in a way, right? Because I know what Kopi's talked about, and I remember reading an interview with some writer a long time ago who said that when she is in the process of writing a novel or a book, she said that she doesn't read anything else. She doesn't read other authors. She doesn't read, magazines or anything, because she doesn't want those other voices creeping into her writing. She's worried that it's going to happen, or maybe she knows it's going to happen. And so when she's in the middle of her own project, she doesn't read anything else because that voice can creep in. And I think I think it can definitely happen, without you realizing it, because if you're, so much of what you do is almost, subconscious in a way.
Oh yeah.
So
subconsciously I could see it creeping in.
Yeah. But I think at the same time, you have that confidence, you have that sense of vision, and you can probably kind of keep yourself safe from it. So
yeah, I just been looking through a camera for so long. I'm so old.
How long, can I ask how old are you?
46.
46. Okay. So you've been at it for 29 years since your dad, or no, longer than that.
Longer, 33.
33 years since your dad gave you that camera.
Yeah.
Wild.
And it's still a joy to pick up a camera and see a new space.
It? How would you describe that feeling? You've mentioned it several times, how much you love taking pictures, how you'll choose the camera over the surfboard or over the snowboard. Like what, and we could ask Kopi this question too, but what is it for you guys that, like, what?
You want to go first?
What is that feeling?
I don't know, man. I think it is a little bit of like, the voyeur in some of us, in that we like to observe and we like to watch things happen, and we can participate in them at times, but just, I don't know, like arranging, like you were saying, how you're always like framing things when we're looking at stuff. And so I think but
that's happening even without a camera.
It is totally
like all the time. It's just happening everywhere you are. Light hitting or
so I think just like observation and is part of it for me.
I think there's a bunch of different parts for me. One is maybe coming up the way I did and working with close friends and realizing that they get enjoyment out of something that I'm doing too and creating, and it's beneficial for them is really fun. There's so many things, the places the camera's taken us and the people we get to work with and the experiences we get to have. And I mentioned to Kopi earlier, like we did this shoot a few years ago with a man named Edwin Evers, and he'd won the Bassmaster Pro a couple times. And was really cool. I mean, I'm not into bass fishing, but we got to go on this really cool bass fishing boat, and there's stickers everywhere, and we just go really fast, and then we catch these bass, and then he's like, and he's got billboards of himself in his hometown, and he's like, oh, come over, hang out at our house, and I'm like, man, if I didn't have a camera, there's no way I'm going to Edwin Evers' house. This is cool as shit.
Where is that at?
I think Edwin's in Alabama. I actually don't remember. Okay. We might need to edit that out. Down there. I think he's in Alabama.
Down there in Bassland. Yeah. Basically.
It was cool.
There's lots of big bass.
But I just think of all the spots that I've been invited to go with my camera.
Yeah.
And just kind of wonder, if I didn't have a camera, would I be in these places? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely kind of opened up the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. And kind of back to your question. I mean, I don't have my camera today. Like I'm not one of those people that always has a camera. Do you always travel with a camera?
Not always. I mean, there's definitely times where I like to, leave it depending on what I'm doing. But like, I mean, I like to have it, but sometimes it's like that added thing in your head about, either feeling pressured to make photographs when you do have it, and I kind of don't like that kind of always on my shoulder.
I'd rather just turn it off.
Yeah.
If I'm not shooting photos, I just shut it off completely. But then if I feel like there's a purpose or a reason to have it, then I'm all in. I'll do it.
And then also sometimes it's just like security, like always having to be like, think about like, oh, there's thousands of dollars of equipment right here. Like,
but what about just like a point and shoot?
I can like to just use that.
I wish I was better at that. I just always, because I always see things and I shoot them on my phone. I'm like, shit, I wish I had a real camera.
Yeah. Do you still shoot film?
Not enough.
Yeah. Every once in a while still though?
Every once in a while. Yeah. I have some personal projects that I want to dive back into with film.
What was the transition like from, because it sounds like you had to sort of live through the transition from film to digital.
Yeah, I probably was shooting film for 10 plus years before I picked up a digital, and I didn't like digital at the beginning at all. I hated it. It was really foreign. Yeah. And now obviously like workflows and things, you have to shoot digital. Yeah. But a lot of the jobs I'm on, it's like, can we have the photos tomorrow? Yeah. And it's just not possible with film. Yeah. But the reason I want to shoot film with the projects that I just mentioned is really the process of slowing everything down and actually becoming a photographer again. And that's what I think has been lost over the last 20 years is just the art of photography. Every time there's a new camera that comes out, it feels like a little bit of photography's taken away. And so for me, I like the idea of having to think, oh shit, did I load my film right? And is the exposure right? And taking a light meter and actually taking the exposure and correctly and all these little things. And how do you see the light? Are you taking that light meter and facing it this way, or are you facing it the opposite way? And all those little things, like you're taking the portrait today and you had the light meter at me. What were you doing there? Like I usually meter this way, like, so everybody sees something different. And there's so many little nuances to film photography where with digital, you just take a picture and you're like, oh shit, I'll just change that and that and that and that. Yeah. And then you get it the next try. Whereas film, you really have to know what you're doing. Yeah. So that's really pushing me to shoot more film. Cool. Having said that, it's easier said than done. Yeah.
Can you talk about those projects that you have? I don't know if totally. I don't know if they're like in the works.
No,
or just
they're in the works, and I mean, I'm not too worried about discussing them. But one of the projects, I grew up in Tofino, basically just playing in the waves when I was younger. A beach called North Chesterman's. And I remember I grew up with a family called the Brewweilers. They're one of the legendary surf families in Canada. And they grew up, basically our families had there was this crazy trailer park on the beach where we first grew up. And now it's a campground, but literally there were trailers on the beach. Yeah. And so my family had a trailer there and the Brewweiler family had a trailer. And then they ended up moving out to the beach, the big beach, where there were bigger waves and everything. And their family built a house there, and my family moved to town.
Bigger waves and houses.
Yeah, totally. And but I just remember going over there and just some of the memories of, we just go out, when we were little kids, we just go out and like wrestle in the waves and just play in the waves and mess around. But I remember going back to their house and jumping in the tub, and our hands wouldn't even, like, you couldn't close your pinky back to your hand because your hands were so cold. And so I want to shoot a black and white photo series from that particular beach, but when it's really nasty, when it's blowing 30 or 40 miles an hour, and back then there wouldn't be people on the beach because they're like, why would you go out there in that? But now there's lots of people, and there's Gore-Tex and all the stuff. But and wetsuits weren't very good. We'd come in freezing cold. Now you can stay out forever.
Yeah.
But that's one of them. I want to shoot a whole film series of just that feeling of being there. And it was really gross in the wintertime, and dark and rainy and windy, and probably not the place most kids grew up playing, but that's where we grew up playing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Were there, you said your dad gave you your first camera at 13. Were you aware of photography before that, or after that? Did you become aware of photographers? Were there influences back then?
Not really influences. I think the biggest influence would have been, and this would have been prior to when my dad gave me the camera, but my grandfather used to like traveling, and he'd go to the Rockies and he'd do these. He had a VW van and he'd cruise around and he'd take photos. But then I remember a lot of the photos in his albums, he was actually taking pictures of postcards, but I thought they were his photos. I'm like, wow, these are incredible. Like,
that's
oh my
amazing.
Gosh. And he'd write little stories on them.
Would he take pictures of postcards that he just found in the store and then just like,
I actually don't
bring it
remember. I think maybe he did.
That's legendary.
Yeah, and that was one of my first memories of photography, looking through photo albums of all these places. But then in like getting into surfing photography, I was the only one. Now there are probably more than 20 photographers living in Tofino.
In Tofino.
Yeah.
That are making a living or a part of their living as photographers. Back when I was there, other than myself, who wasn't making any money yet, there was a painter, Mark Hobson, who was one of my earliest influences, who was more into photography then. And Mark did a slideshow when I was in grade 5 at the elementary school about his trip across the Sahara Desert. And I was blown away. And I think that was probably my earliest influence, was Mark. And I didn't really think about it until I started shooting photos. And I like remember that being a driver, like, wow, this guy's doing some really cool stuff, adventure.
And sense of and
then there was another photographer, Adrian Dorst, who was a birder. But he was a birder first and then kind of did photography, and his work I remember as well. So those were my first two influences starting up. But they were both local guys. In the surf world, all I had was surf magazines or skateboard or snowboard magazines. So I would see names in the magazines, but other than that, it was just those two local guys.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen any of your skateboarding or snowboarding work, and it's probably just because it's not as, widely published or out there.
But I don't know if any of it's been published other than one snowboard article where my first, and it's ironic that I became an editor at their company, but Snowboard Canada ran a whole feature of my work. No credit, no payment. That was one of those Surfers Journal things starting out. And I remember, I won't say the guy's name, but I remember him saying, oh, well, the surfer gave us permission to use all the photos, so we thought it was okay. And he ran 10 pages.
Oof.
Yeah. So it was images you had taken of a surfer, and the surfer was like, oh, yeah, you guys can use those.
Yeah. Oh, and it was snowboarding and surfing.
Brutal.
But a lot of the snowboarding, that was more just me growing as a photographer. The skate park was half a block away, and I would just go down there with the flash and play around. And
I guess what I was going to ask you is that I have seen plenty of your surf photography, and I have seen, plenty of your fly fishing work and fly fishing related work and nature work. Do you like, what kind of parallels do you see between surfing and fishing? And
a lot of parallels. I think the main one is, how do I say this the right way?
Just go for it.
I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, but yeah, just the protecting, I don't want to call it a resource. It's not a resource, but just sort of protecting a special thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of interesting because I don't always feel like I'm on one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But in surfing, it was always take photos of a place and you can be credited and you can actually sell a photo, but never say where that place is. It's always protecting places.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just generally I would say protecting something special to people. And I don't always agree with that. Personally, I think that a lot of my work has allowed people to have some pretty great experiences or driven them to go look for that place that I call nowhere, but is special to me. And I just, I think that's pretty cool that more people are outside adventuring, exploring. And I think that's a big part of conservation is actually getting people out of their houses and off their phones and off their computers and going out and having an adventure, doing something on their own and being out of their comfort zone and exploring those new places and those unknowns, I think.
Like, yeah, there's this really rad place, but if nobody knows about it and
exactly
it becomes threatened in a way, like, is anyone
if nobody
care
cares
enough to really want to step up and voice their opinion?
Yeah, and then there's the flip side of that where
right.
there's just too many people going to those places and they're being ruined because of that.
Yeah.
So, but the ownership thing, I've never... Just because you're a white guy who got to the surf break before the other white guy doesn't mean you own it any more than they do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been people here for thousands of years. Like, get over yourself. But yeah, a lot of parallels. And I think that's why I kind of just fell into the fly fishing world and kind of enjoy photographing it. A lot of characters.
At what point did you start? So you kind of start out with the surfing, skate, snow. You've been shooting fly fishing and kind of the world of fly fishing. At what point did you start shooting animals and just like getting these amazing shots? I mean, the stuff that you've gotten of fish, birds, bears, mountain lions, wolves, it's great stuff. I think
it's just along the way.
Yeah.
It's just all of those things that happen along the way. I'm in those out of the way places, and quite often there are more animals than there are people in those places. So they're just there, and they've just been in front of the camera, and then we're talking about it today, Kopi. I feel more comfortable photographing a portrait of a bear than a human. Way easier. And I've had those special connections where the bear, it almost is like they're sitting for a portrait.
Yeah.
I have this photo. I don't know if you guys are going to show photos in this thing, but I have this photo, and it's in the gallery, and I sell it as a print. It's called Fortune Bear, and it was taken in Fortune Sound. And literally the bear came out of the bush, and we were in a boat, and we're photographing another bear who was feeding on the beach. And this bear realized, oh, my spot's taken. I'm just going to go and sit down. But it literally almost looks like it sat cross-legged down by the shore, looked at the camera.
Yeah.
I took its portrait, and then it's kind of like, okay, cool. I'm going to go see if I can find a spot to have lunch. Like, really cool. And when you have those connections with animals that, where they still, we're in a boat, we were a little bit far away, we're quiet, we're not really interfering with their life. It's pretty neat. It's almost, I mean, they're almost showing those human-like qualities, and it's like you're shooting a portrait of a human, but it's a bear.
Yeah. So that's not something you're necessarily going and seeking out all the time. It's kind of
no, and I probably should go and
working
seek
for the
out.
lodge, or you're on a fishing shoot, or you're up somewhere surfing, and it's like, well,
I mean, I
there's
think
bears
it's like,
here.
on a lot of the I mean, a lot of the trips we did as kids, like our parents would shake their heads so hard. Like we were camping and just like the amount of wildlife we saw, or just where we took our boats. Like, yeah, my dad.
Without your parents?
Without our parents.
Yeah. Just you and
from
buddies
a pretty young age, just some pushing the boundaries for sure.
Yeah.
And just places, I mean, yeah, not talking it up, but the west coast of Vancouver Island in the winter in a 15-foot welded aluminum with a 50 horse on is not really the place to be in 20-foot swell, but you just kind of do it. And then sometimes you get sort of pushed into it where you reach that point where you have the sea behind you and you're not turning around. You're just sort of committed and you're going until you can find a spot to pull out.
Yeah.
And multiple times. But obviously always being safe, and nothing really ever happened. But
relatively safe.
But yeah, animals were always growing up. Animals were always around.
I mean, it really is the amazing thing about even coming, Kopi lives in Bellingham, which is an hour south of here, Vancouver, only, right across the water, basically, from Vancouver Island. I live down in Olympia, a few hours away. The difference between, Washington State and Vancouver Island, animal-wise, and I would say BC generally, even get a little bit.
Do you think that's because of people?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Mostly.
I think big time. I mean, it's just, there's more people down in the Puget Sound sort of greater, region. But it's just, that's all just to say that, you go to Vancouver Island and it's like you're inside of this big zoo.
Yeah.
And
pretty wild.
You're right up, the animals are right there. And it's so cool. It's so special. And every time I've been up there, I don't want to leave.
We don't have any snakes or spiders.
Yeah.
There are dangerous snakes or spiders.
Yeah. That is my dream. That is my dream right there.
The
Take me as far away from snakes and spiders as I can be, and I will be super happy.
Same.
Give me the bears. But, before we go, I did want to talk, a little bit about some of the stuff you've had going on lately. You've been busy this spring, both just going on shoots, it sounds like. There's a new gallery. But one thing I wanted to ask you about is this life of, doing shoots in different places, working with brands, working on your own stuff. How do you kind of find the balance? What are the ways that you sort of balance that and stay connected with your family and your friends and with the island and whatnot?
Yeah,
how do you find that? Or do you?
At the moment, I'm having a hard time finding balance because there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
But I think I'm always trying to be present when I'm home. And I haven't done the best job of that in the past because work is always there in the background. I'm self-employed, so I'm always thinking about work all the time. I have a home office.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just try to be present for your family when you're home.
Yeah.
And my family now realizes that all these opportunities are great opportunities and help me make a living that helps further our family.
Yeah.
But I think you're always juggling that, and some opportunities are hard to say no to, and you have pressure from friends now that you've created these friendship work relationships.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm just always sort of driven to continue going. And I think a part of the balance moving forward will be to bring my family on more and more trips.
Yeah.
And I had an incredible trip actually to the Crumps Lodge 58 North in Alaska. And I was able to bring my wife and daughter.
Oh, cool.
And we had a couple of days, but one experience where we were dropped off at the seaplane and then we jet boated up this river. And we spent the whole afternoon just with Kate Crump and what an amazing guide and friend and just special human being. And we're surrounded by grizzly bears. And my daughter caught this massive trout, and she's not even really into fishing, but she caught this massive trout. And just remember in my head, Kate screaming, "Set the hook, Bella, set the hook." And Bella doing it and not really knowing what she was doing, but she did it.
Yeah.
And she landed this fish and it was just like, I don't know, like she can handle the fish better than I can. She's keeping it in the water. She held it for a couple of photos, let it go, and was just kind of like, yeah, it was cool. Let's go. Like, had lunch with a family of grizzly bears across the river. Like, just the most cool experience. But now I'm thinking, how do I teach my daughter that these are really incredible experience? This isn't just something you go out every day. She's kind of I'm setting the bar pretty high. So, yeah. But I think that's the main thing, is finding that balance, is just having the family come on more of these experiences with me.
Yeah. Do you ever find yourself thinking, whether maybe you're on a trip or after a trip, thinking to yourself like, I should have just said no to that one?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah. I say that because I find that that's something that I struggle with, is like saying no to opportunities. I don't get those kinds of opportunities, but I get offered opportunities to do different things, and then I end up really stressed out and tired, and it hurts my relationships, and I just it's something I have had to learn to be better about, is just like being okay with saying no and not chasing every little thing down. You know what I mean? And
saying no is tough.
Super tough.
Like I just mentioned, especially when it's a friend that has offered you this experience or this trip, and you're working with them. And also something as you grow as a person and as a family, something that your family and you have to figure out along the way.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't just happen overnight. There are times where I definitely was saying yes to too many trips, and my wife pulled me back and said, "Hey, like, this isn't working."
Pump the brakes.
Totally. But then I have a daughter who's 12, and as she's growing up, she has things that's going on, and so I almost never miss something that's important to her, if I can help it. If it's not a really incredible opportunity that's going to make a bunch of dough for the bank account, like the dance recital, annual dance recital, you got to be home.
Yeah.
Soccer games, you got to try to be home. Obviously, birthdays, you got to be home. But that's something you kind of just figure out as a family. And a lot of times I can't be home for that stuff, but I try to call or be on the phone, and they understand. And it changes from when Bella was 1 and I was away a lot, is a lot different than when Bella's 12 and I'm away a lot. So now it's a lot easier for my wife, and maybe not that much easier because Bella's at 12 going on 18.
Yeah.
But, so it's just something you kind of figure out along the way.
Yeah. We met you at the gallery earlier. Tell us about the new spot here. It's on Granville Island in downtown Vancouver.
Granville Island, about 6 months ago, friend Steve Woods, who's an outdoor photographer, mentioned an opportunity, and I came over and checked out a space, and we're talking about doing a gallery together. And I was kind of humming and hawing, and I realized we kind of need a third. And so we asked our friend Paul, who owns a clothing company called Anion, and he was interested, and he has a shop not too far away in Kitsilano here in Vancouver. But he thought Granville Island could be a good opportunity, so we opened it up in April, and so far it's been great. Yeah, we're just trying to get the word out, and it's called Wild Space Gallery and Apparel. And it's just kind of fun. I have a little gallery space in Tofino on my own, but it's kind of fun to collaborate with people and see their vision and work with their vision, within their vision. Yeah, it was a really nice little space. Super cozy. Thank you. A bunch of great photography by you and Steve Woods. Yeah. And Anion, the Anion gear is cool. Is that a Vancouver
Victoria-based company?
It's a Victoria-based company.
Victoria, okay.
And all made in Canada clothing. And Paul's got quite a cool story. He was just in Pakistan.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of the wool that they source from around the world, they don't actually dye the clothing. They just find enough of a certain color and then they respin it and they create the colors that they're doing.
Wow.
So there's this, really neat ethos to the company. And it's not the cheapest clothing, but I've owned the shirt for, I want to say, over 5 years, and I wear it almost every day. And it's quality, and it's warm, and it's perfect for the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. What does it mean to have a gallery space, have kind of, it's part business, part sort of, art space, place to show your work. How important is that to you, to just be able to share what you do and also, kind of the business side of things? And
it's very important. When I started the gallery in Tofino, it was funny because I had, the idea that I would just open the space and if I broke even, I was winning. And I kind of still have that attitude. My friend Adrian, who manages it, she's always sort of like, oh, sales are a little bit down. What should we do? And I'm like, Aid, if we're breaking even, we're winning. This is amazing. It's so cool to have people come in person, view something tangible on the wall. It's such a different world than being on your phone or being on your computer. And then when I get the opportunity to be in there and actually tell people stories about every image has a story. So it's a really fun experience for me, and I hope so for them. And I went into it, like I said, not wanting to make money, and it's been supporting itself, which is great. But for me, as long as we're breaking even, we're winning. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well, what do you got coming up this summer?
I have a pretty stacked next month and a half. 4 back-to-back fishing trips. I'm on a trip to the Bahamas with Kyle Schaefer for 10 days.
Kyle's great. At Berry Islands?
Yeah. And we're going to cruise around looking for permit. Cool. And that kind of came out of just meeting him last year and talking about photography. Yeah. And then, I don't even want to say, but I get to go up to the Dean River for a trip, which is a lot of fun. Close friend.
You don't have to disclose the next two. It's fine.
Some fun trips coming up. Yeah. And they're all fishing focused. And I just feel so fortunate to be where I am and get to carry a camera around and capture the world the way I see it. It's incredible.
Thanks for listening to Sidechannels, presented by the Flyfish Journal. Sidechannels is produced and edited by yours truly, with production support from Jeff Galbraith and Colin Wiseman, and digital and web support from Jesse Lou Galbraith, Colby Messick, and Kobe Vojta. Thanks as well to our sponsors, Decked. Get decked and get after it at decked.com/flyfish, and Patagonia Fly Fishing, dependable gear built to connect with wild fish. Visit patagonia.com/fly-fish to learn more. And of course, if you're enjoying Sidechannels, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to rate and review the show. It makes a big difference. Have fun out there, enjoy the process, and we'll see you in a couple weeks with episode 4.